In a tense Washington hearing led by Senator Rick Scott, lawmakers and business leaders clashed over the growing infiltration of Chinese influence in U.S. markets. Investors like Mr. Allaire and Mr. Finta painted a dire picture of stolen technology, unpunished fraud, and seniors losing their life savings. Voices rose as accusations flew about IP theft, algorithm secrecy, and Wall Street turning a blind eye, leaving the room charged with anger and disbelief over how long America has allowed this imbalance to continue.
Nobody has said, okay, you're not complying, and all they've been taught from us is there's no consequence. You can do whatever the hell you want, and you don't pay the price. You have just told the story of 1 million small businesses in America over the last 20 years. I've heard estimates of as low as 20 billion without the algorithm, as high as 40 with it. So who knows? Apparently, it's pretty clear to me today, after what I've listened to, that there'll be no algorithm in the deal.
Thank you, Senator Moody. Yeah, we've got a lot of votes this afternoon, so I have to go back and forth for votes. Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Finta, I wanted to start with you. As I was preparing for this hearing, I was trying to get a sense of just the magnitude of the problem that we face, and I think every single one of us realizes that we don't know the full extent and scope of what we're dealing with. And I thought, in fact, your testimony, approached this with a sense of humility. You said, I believe only 10 to 15% of elder fraud victims ever report the crimes against them. I guess I just wanted to start based off of your experience. Are there any best practices that you have seen, or are there certain types of steps that we should be taking to make it easier for the reporting, or try to have a better handle, try to better encourage people to come forward, but also making sure that we know what we're actually dealing with?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. It's a great opportunity to talk about what should be as opposed to what is right now. And unfortunately, right now, in the United States, the reporting is remarkably low. One of the other kind of consequences of the crime itself is that a lot of our seniors would prefer to report to their local police departments. But when you walk into a police department in the United States right now and you say, hey, my mom or my dad or myself was the victim of a pop-up ad on the internet where I went to a digital currency ATM and sent money overseas. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the time, what you're going to immediately get is, hey, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
You should call the FBI, or you should file a claim with IC3. When you call the FBI as an individual, or HSI, or you file a claim with the Internet Crime Complaint Center, you're viewed essentially as an individual who lost $30,000, could be your life savings. Unfortunately, there's hundreds of thousands of those complaints. And without a real combined effort to aggregate, really analyze, and work the most pressing complaints, again, with our private industry partners, we're pushing a giant rock uphill as law enforcement. And it does not encourage people to do those reports when they don't see the effects of them. Right? When you file a complaint and that complaint does not get worked, you're not called to testify at a sentencing hearing.
Yeah.
You don't get that.
Well, you said here in a follow-up sentence, even with this low percentage, the volume of complaints is still far too large to investigate under current circumstances. As you were saying, I guess I wanted to just ask, are we thinking about it in the right model here? I was about to ask you, how much more do we have to surge resources towards this? But, this is kind of like a Sisyphean effort, though, in terms of just, constantly feeling like we're never actually going to scratch what is actually there. I guess I wanted to ask you, in terms of what you experienced, are we successful in addressing some of the complaints that we had? Or is that just not the right direction in terms of being able to put our resources towards?
No, and I believe with any large problem, there has to be multiple approaches to combat it. This is just one of them in terms of actual investigation and enforcement. I do believe that if we constructed, because I did have great success, at least locally, on the Elder Justice Task Force in San Diego County with 13 police departments all participating, with private industry participating almost in real time. It is effective as a model if you proliferate that across the country. So the combined results of 50, 100 EJTFs around the country would start to have a disincentive effect on those groups overseas and the people here facilitating those crimes.
I see. So you're saying if you can replicate that type of structure and have it scaled across our country, but still would need to be some type of coordinating body. Is that something that you see be able to rest within the FBI, or is that something at federal government level to try to coordinate across?
Well, that's a good question, and that's outside of my lane in terms of speaking for other agencies. But I do think, again, with, for example, National Elder Fraud Coordination Center, to aggregate the data from U.S. companies who do have amazing resources to support those types of investigations would be a game changer.
Thank you, Senator Kim. Senator Justice.
Well, first of all, thank you for all three of you coming in your testimony. I didn't get the chance to hear it, and so, we've been running back and forth doing all these votes and everything. But I've got to just tell you just this. For one of you, Kevin, we've become real friends, and what an incredible man this man is. I've had him in my office in Charleston, West Virginia, in the governor's office, and I had the opportunity to be the governor of the state of West Virginia for 8 years. And I can tell you that I can speak very frankly and say, I don't know that anybody's been in that office that's been more credible than this man. And so I appreciate our friendship. He's done every single thing that he said he would do, even to the point in time when he called West Virginia a winner state. And I would say just this: if West Virginia is a winner state, I love the contest of ball games and everything. But absolutely, we can't possibly say we're winning. We're absolutely winning when it comes to China. I don't see how anybody can say that and say that in a fair way. Now, I can honestly say just this too. One of his companies, Prime 6, and I hope I'm not stepping out of my bounds and everything, but he came and in November of last year, we were sitting, in a location in Fairmont, West Virginia. And he said, we're going to make this a go, and we're going to make it a go now. And I think they're scheduled for June, from November to June. And absolutely, they're pulling it off. And so, like I said, as far as credibility, he has not only my vote, but many in the great state of West Virginia. So with all that being said, Kevin, as your friend, I would just ask just this, because we've got a lot of elderly people in West Virginia, and those retirees are absolutely being bombarded in a lot of ways. I thank you for bringing awareness, all three of you, awareness to a real problem in this great country that we know about, but we don't seem to do anything about it. Kevin just a minute ago said just that. We know about it. For God's sakes, a living, this can't be that hard. We know about it, and we don't do anything about it. Well, I really don't get it. Like I said, I'm a new kid on the block here, but I'm a kid that abounds in common sense and logic and goodness and truth. And so I've got just one question, and it's just an echo of the same question, but it just basically says this. It says, the lack of transparency, financial representation, ties to human rights violations, and scams are just many of the reasons why investing in Chinese companies has become a real and unique threat. What can individuals in West Virginia, the residents of our great state, do to help protect themselves and their retirements and their pensions and from these financial threats? And so please, Kevin, if you would, and you've probably already given us a whole bunch of advice already, but I didn't have the liberty to be able to be here to hear it, but please tell us more wisdom.
Well, I just feel that if the initiative and the incentive from these hearings and with other members is to enforce existing laws as they stand, we will end up in a much better place in terms of our relationship with China, because they are a large economy, we are larger, and there's a chance to work all this out. I might add that while we've been sitting here, my phone's been lighting up. The market's up 3,000 points, because what's occurring here is the tariff situation with the rest of the world, although chaotic, is getting organized. It seems that way. 69 countries coming to the table, and maybe we end up with zero tariffs. I don't know. China is not the same. It's not the same. We have to resolve the issues we have been talking about here today as part of the negotiation. I don't care if we get to 400% tariffs on China. The only thing I care about is getting them to the table to resolve these issues, to make it safe for every American to invest there or do business with them, including in West Virginia. And, you know, this is changing by the hour, but now I'm starting to see what's happening, and so is the market too. The world is one thing. China is completely different. Tariffs are being used to get them to the table to level the playing field finally. And all of us that are involved in dealing with this and competing with it applaud it. I can assure you, I'm the voice of millions on this that have been doing business there. And something else West Virginia can do that I think is going to be coming into the highlight pretty soon as we get into this AI competition with China. There are very few states or locations in America or Mexico or Canada that have as much stranded natural gas as West Virginia has. And that's pure gold for AI. Now, I can speak to you as, you know, in working with your government, you move permits quickly for that Prime 6 plant you spoke of, and that's why it's happening so fast. Do the same thing in AI development. Allow companies to come there, tap the stranded gas, bring in the turbines, build the facilities, and light up AI. You can't do that right now in Virginia because of the rules and regulations. We're not allowing gas turbines to work in conjunction with diesel backup generation. And so the sites in West Virginia become prime real estate now for AI. You will transform your state's economy by embracing energy, because we don't have enough in America. And you have senators there, and there's lots of other people in your government in West Virginia that understand this opportunity is huge. It's absolutely huge. Demand is insatiable. You got to tap that and move at the same speed you did, and I'm just one investor in West Virginia. It was a winner state because you got stuff done, and everybody has to hear that message.
All right, thank you so much, and thank all of you. Thank all of you for being here today.
So, Mr. O'Leary, what if there was a company called WeatherTech? You know, and they produce really nice mats for their car.
I have them in my F-150.
And they woke up one day and they looked on Alibaba and they saw that their products were being sold on Alibaba. And they looked at their shipping, and they never had done any business with Alibaba. And they looked just like the mats that they produced in Illinois, and they even had their name on it. Right? What could they do to stop this theft of their product? And they got nothing for it. What would be their recourse right now?
There is nothing they can do. You have just told the story of 1 million small businesses in America over the last 20 years. They innovate, they create, they're entrepreneurs, they prove their product in the American consumer market. At around 5 million in sales, they're knocked off. By whom? China. Very often, the same plants that ran the molds under a relationship they had with the company. A lot of companies went to China 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and put their molds there. And during the day, the company would run the WeatherTech mat, in this example, here theoretically, and then at night, they'd run the knockoff mat. And they would bring it into the market, let me guess, 30% off retail of WeatherTech. And I've seen this happen countless times. And in some cases where the company's very small, they go out of business. And nobody hears that tree falling in the forest. It happens thousands of times. There's such an immense opportunity here to enforce existing laws. But really, at the end of the day, the reason that behemoth company couldn't do anything about it, they have no access to the Chinese courts. They can't resolve the complaint through litigation, as we do here. So my recommendation is, look, if you're a Chinese company and you want to use our courts to litigate your complaint, sorry, Not until you open yours. We'd love to work with you, but unless it's a reciprocal play, the whole idea of today's conversation was just to get to a reciprocal playing field, a even playing field. American companies have always been very competitive anywhere on earth when given a chance on a transparent and competitive playing field. That's not the case in China. I mean, we're all saying the same thing here. It's got to get fixed. And finally, here we are with tariffs being the excuse. But now I think she has to come to the table, and I hope it happens. And I'd like to see tomorrow morning 400% tariffs.
So that's it. Let's say there's the same company called WeatherTech, and they know Alibaba is selling in the United States of America to American consumers. They wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't be able to get money out of Alibaba right here.
No, they can try. Sometimes it's a big enough case, they will take it down. Amazon, it's much better if you can prove that you own the IP. And, you know.
But they couldn't get any damages out of Alibaba.
I doubt
right?
it. I have never heard of a case resolved to the satisfaction of the company that's making the complaint, ever. Now, there may be a case I don't know of, but the WTO is supposed to provide this platform. You find me 1 year since 2020 where there haven't been a plethora of complaints exactly like the one you've just detailed, and there's been no consequences. None. Zero. And the Chinese economy has done very, very well on the back of stolen IP and ripping tech off and using products at much lower price points that they've made themselves based on American IP. Look, it's got to stop. I mean, and I'm sure most Chinese people would love to compete. I mean, there's great Chinese entrepreneurs. They don't need to cheat and steal. They can't. We just need a level playing field. I would love to see this resolved, and I hope it happens. But I say, and what I've learned and what I've seen in my long career is China understands only one thing: the stick. Give them the stick. They
so we
respond
have
to the stick.
Hopefully today we'll confirm a new chairman to the Securities and Exchange Commission. So what would you ask him to do? What do you think his responsibility is? Because if I used to take companies public, and when I took them public, I had to have current financial statements. I had to disclose all the material information, right? And the SEC enforced it, right? I had to do it with when I took things public and I sold securities, and I had to do it with my 10Qs and 10Ks every quarter and every year. So what should he do right now? He'll probably be sworn into office tomorrow. What should he do?
I assume you're referring to Paul Atkins.
Right.
He should go right back to the files and execute the mandate the law has given him. There must be dozens of companies that are offside right now in compliance on GAAP. Dozens. They should have been delisted 2 years ago. They're still trading. They're still raising capital. They're still competing with people like me for that money, and they're not compliant with GAAP. There is no way on earth I could do that. I would never have that opportunity, and yet they do. All I want from him, and I think you'll hear a lot of people saying the same thing, is you have this mandate, now enforce it.
Yeah. What about these Wall Street firms that say look, American investors, they want to invest in these companies, and if we don't allow them to invest in an American stock exchange through an American stock exchange, they'll just go some other place. What would your response be to that?
What's going to happen when this law starts to be enforced is, and this is the case in almost every regulator, it's the 7 big regulators on earth, they speak with the SEC practically weekly. Everybody complies with the law that's actually implemented and enforced in America in one way or another. They don't want to be offside with the world's largest capital market. It's not that they like us. They want access to the largest capital market. The reason the ADGM in Abu Dhabi doesn't want to get involved with companies that are not compliant with the SEC or whatever body it is in the U.S. is because they want access to the world's largest and most liquid capital market, and they don't want to ever be offside. It's the strength of America and the access to the market and the largest consumers market that gives it its strength, and it hasn't used it. And this administration finally, and a lot of people don't like the style of the president, I get it. And listen, with Trump, the way I look at it is I don't focus on the noise, I focus on the signal. What I'm hearing is enough. And we're going to enforce the laws. And that's probably a good outcome for everybody. Although, watching the market go up and down 3,000 points a day is people gnash their teeth. But if that's the price, it's worth it.
Chris, this is just a theoretical issue. These Chinese companies, we don't really know what the financial statements are, but it's never really a problem. No one ever loses money. Has that ever happened, or is it just a theoretical problem?
No, it's happened. There's been multiple companies. There was a pharmaceutical company named Kangmei where one day it was a going concern, and the next day it had a $15 billion hole in its balance sheet, and that was because the CCP decided it was no longer a useful concern for it. And that was part of some of the index funds. That's one of the reasons why we started to get involved in this. And to add to what Kevin said on your previous question, they can go overseas if they'd like to, but there's no rule of law in Hong Kong. There's no rule of law in mainland China that stands up to our rule of law. And there's also something called the fiduciary duty, which requires you to do diligence, to investigate. You have an obligation to your shareholders to take into account reputational risks, geopolitical risks, the fact that they might just take over the whole board from a Monday to a Tuesday, or that they might impose capital controls, which basically absorb all of the retained earnings at that company. That's too big of a risk to take as a fiduciary. So I think that's a false argument. I've heard it multiple times, and that's how I would push back on it. It hasn't.
So the underwriter who sold the stock of a company that didn't comply with GAAP has no liability in the United States.
That's not been tested yet.
So you
With
think
the Chinese company.
What do you think the law is?
With an American company, that has been tested multiple times, and the underwriter also is liable generally. Now, the exchanges are self-regulatory organizations, which means they have legal authority to adjust their standards, and they're supposed to protect the integrity of their marketplace. And if they have companies trading on their market that aren't complying with U.S. laws, then they do have some sort of a regulatory obligation to remove them to protect the integrity of the market and the investors who trade on it. To date, they haven't done that.
So the underwriter has had no liability, the exchange has no liability, and the mutual fund has no liability. So all the money, if they all did this, then the only person that's holding the bag is the 65-year-old lady that thought she was buying into a safe mutual fund.
That's correct, Senator.
Can I add something to that? Because I think you made a great point. Let's say Atkins delists a Chinese company and it immediately goes to London Exchange and says, oh, I just got delisted off the New York Stock Exchange and I want to get listed now here. I would think the regulator there would say, can you tell me why you got delisted? Oh, we broke the law in the U.S. Oh, please, come and list here. I mean, obviously, if you're a mutual fund manager with a mandate, you're not going to want to touch that company. Once they get tainted by breaking U.S. securities laws, that's a tattoo forever on that board. They're not going to escape it in any market on earth. It's going to make their shares worth 60% off retail. So I'm not worried about anybody moving, and I suggest my colleague's 100% right. Once they get delisted for breaking the law, they are radioactive waste in financial services.
So, Mr. Finter, so if you were the new FBI director, all right, I'll give you just something one Florida sheriff said to me. They said, we probably don't really need a whole bunch of help on any more bank robberies like we probably needed in the 30s. What we really need is help on these international scams because we don't have any ability to deal with these international scams. What would your recommendation to the FBI be?
Sir, I would recommend a reshuffling of resources to include treating these types of scams and frauds as transnational organized crime. At the moment, to some degree, depending where you are, but they're generally looked at as a white-collar crime. The type of investigation that one conducts on white-collar crime as opposed to transnational organized crime tend to differ. Also, transnational organized crime has the ability to rope in agencies all across the United States to assist, which is what you need. When you have money mules in 14 different states, victims in 50 states, actual organizers in a dozen different states, you need a team to work those types of cases. I would also I would also step up the amount of interaction on a real-time basis with America's companies, with our private sector, so that the access to that data, where the evidence lies, happens faster to increase the amount of accomplishment in a shorter period of time. We could do more cases with less.
So things like bank robberies or other issues that the FBI historically had been involved in that probably local law enforcement has the ability to do on their own. There's probably other areas. If they actually said, we're not going to focus on that, but we're going to focus on these international scams, would the FBI have the resources to put a lot of smart talent against these international scams?
The FBI hires pretty well, sir. I think they have a lot of good, smart people that can do this. I will say, I'm not going to speak for the FBI and what their resources are right now. Just like we did with the healthcare fraud task forces in the past, I think it would be appropriate for the Congress, for the Senate, to actually staff those with budgets, with requirements, to say, hey, listen, if we're going to ask you to do this, we're going to give you the resources to do it. But if we did, as a country, we could accomplish a lot of good.
So Kevin and Chris, so let's say I have a new company and I feel really good about it and I want to take it public, right? So why wouldn't I just pick, there's no real reason. I could pick any exchange in the world, right? Wouldn't be, what if would I have any discount if I said, I'm not going to do it here, I'm going to go and do it on the Indian Stock Exchange or the Hong Kong Stock Exchange or the Shanghai, Stock Exchange? Is there any reason why I will get more money and my trading will be clearly more liquid if I pick an American exchange? Is there any reason to have it? Is there any discount? Any reason not to do it?
Every company on earth, pretty well every company on earth, if given the option, would either list on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, period. And the reason they would do that is the amount of capital that is interested in investing in a company that's gone through the rigorous compliance and transparency with the regulatory laws here on issuing a prospectus, and the fact that they could get indexed into the billions and trillions of dollars that are actually invested in indexes where their company might be included. The largest index on earth is the S&P 500. It's the gold standard. The United States remains the gold standard for public listings. There's very few exchanges that can compete. A company, most of the time, if they believe they're compliant, will always see the availability of an NYSE or NASDAQ listing first. Very often they'll try London next. But it's every institutional investor on earth, in one way or another, puts almost half their capital into one of those two exchanges. They are the largest on earth, and they're going to remain that way while the rule of law is transparent, and we have an appellate system, and we actually enforce these laws, because the American economy is actually based on confidence. That's what it is. And the belief that it is the most transparent legal system on earth. Now, we've gone through a lot of issues around it, but we've had these issues before. Why is it even adversaries want to invest their capital here? You have to ask yourself that. It's trust. It's it. So the answer is, more people, even adversaries, trust the United States than any other country on earth, and the way you can tell is how they vote their dollars. It all comes here. And anything that, by not enforcing laws, we actually breach that trust. We should be, when Atkins comes in here, he is the steward of these laws. His mandate is to enforce them, to show the world that he and his mandate and the country and the system and the exchanges can be trusted. Anybody that did not enforce those laws was hurting the American brand. That's what they were doing. And that's got to get fixed. You don't want to hurt the mothership, the American dream, the American brand, that it transcends partisan politics or any generation. It has to be maintained. And the way you do that is you enforce these laws. So I'm very hopeful that you're right, that we're going to see a lot of these delistings, and I'm looking forward to it. And they can do the right thing and do like I have to, comply. Pay for that compliance. Hire a firm. Pay the millions it costs to stay listed. And I'm happy they'll do that because I'm happy to compete with them. So,
But it's clearly a change in value, right?
but you know, it'll be open price. The great thing about American capital markets, it's an open price discovery. Once the rules are placed in place and the investors are there, it's going to be negotiated based on whatever the clearing price is. And I think that would be an orderly way to get this thing done. I mean, I would prefer to see it.
By the end, even as Senator Scott and Ranking Member Jill Brown called for bipartisan reform, the tension barely eased. Witnesses like Mr. Liar and Mr. Finta warned that America's credibility is eroding, its laws unenforced, its markets vulnerable, and its retirees at risk. The hearing closed not with closure, but with alarm, as senators vowed to protect our parents and grandparents from what one called a slow financial ambush from Beijing.